look, we're not just talking about reusable rockets here. We're talking about mining resources out in space or on asteroids even. How do you get to visualize from a founder that they can build a totally new ecosystem?
That is such a good question. And, I think that my background in building high growth companies for, the last almost nearly 15, 20 years here has really helped me to better understand, despite not being a rocket scientist myself, what it really takes to build into the future and look to the stars and really see a future for humanity that most of us cannot. And so understanding what it takes to be a great founder, whether you're building, a chocolate bar or a reusable rocket, there are some pretty standard things that make a founder fantastic.
What makes the business opportunity, or at least the valuation, fantastic? Because you are taking such, bigger scale risk in a way of whether or not one can mine in space rather than build a chocolate bar here on Earth.
Right. Well, I think that's something that's really interesting about the economy and the times that we're living in today. Even 5 years ago, I think that this was far too speculative for early stage companies, early stage VC firms to be investing in these companies at the earliest stages. And so, with SpaceX and Blue Origin, who have been really charting the path from the private sector so publicly, it really has allowed us to better understand where the technology is today. And I think for so long, the government, between NASA and then other scientists who really have been building behind that cloak, behind the curtain, all of that technology is finally coming to the forefront. And so for us now, that technology is table stakes. The infrastructure is here. And so to place a bet on the table with the expectation that we might see history be made and some returns come back within the next 10 years is not unreasonable at all.
In many ways, SpaceX has been sucking up all the oxygen in the room, and many anticipate that with Elon's very close relationship with the Trump administration, there might be help from a regulatory perspective. But will that help Stoke as well as the likes of SpaceX?
Yeah, well, I think the beautiful thing about being a startup is that you are much more agile, you are much more nimble, and these founders are not scared of taking really big swings. That's the beauty of being an early stage founder. And it's the luxury, frankly, that SpaceX doesn't have anymore. And so while they have paved the way for, all of the obvious reasons, but really it's the youngest companies that are building now that are going to take advantage of that technology and really build things that, again, when I look at the night sky with my little boys, it's going to look much different for them. And whether that's AstroForge or Stoke or Interlune, they're going to be the reason why.
Is there as much committed capital to other areas? For example, I'm thinking about you deploying money across Web3, across AI, across climate tech in many ways. When you're looking at valuation of an AI company versus a space one, how competitive is it now?
It's really interesting. Obviously, VC loves a good trend and a good hype cycle. But I really do think that while many VCs are looking to AI for the obvious reasons, they're also looking to deep tech in a way that they haven't before. And I think an interesting trend is that you're seeing young generalist funds really come in and sit side by side on cap tables with the expectation of some of these larger multi-stage firms coming in and carrying them through to the finish line. But I really do think that this is the moment. And again, when you see a generalist start getting involved in deep tech, I think that means that there's something more than a trend happening.
What are you seeing in terms of future fundraising opportunities as to whether the companies that you give a seed or very early stage investment to are being able to raise further rounds? You're managing to see the increase in the value of your fund that you've helped build.
Absolutely. And I think that this is where the power of selection really comes into play. My partner, Alexis Ohanian, has quite the track record himself, but really understanding, again, where that people component meets the product. And so for us, early stage investing, there is a power law at play, of course, but the expectation is that we will see these companies move on. If we're investing in the very best founders, we have no doubt that they're going to be able to pick up those later rounds and really take it all the way.